Alright. Looks like we'll get onto it. Here we go. There isn't any Dan here. Good now to you all. This is Daryl as a service on his own. Actually, I put out a buffered tweet earlier and saying come along and see these couple of guys make the usual commentary about Microsoft 365 and what's in the message center. And I forgot that it was a national holiday or national public holiday over in the States. So Dan's off taking a well-earned rest. An annual rest, and I'll just be flying solo. So I'll walk our way through the message center messages and pass some comment. These days, I've not as been as engaged because I've had quite a full workload and projects on the go, and been working and preparing for Microsoft Ignite. So it actually reminded me today how long it's been since I've flown solo and covered things off. It also made me think too about the kinds of messages that we've had in the message center in the last year. And it's really this interesting change I've seen where we used to have a lot of things that were released, and then some functionality or something was available to see on the same day. And so I was able to grab that message, I could go over to my tenant, and it was high likelihood that I could see something there I could demonstrate to you, walk our way through it, and then pass some comment. And of course, as we come up to Microsoft Ignite, there's not a lot that they want to show. They just want to foreshadow or at least talk about it before it's actually available in the end of September. So yeah, we'll have a look at a few things, and we'll pass some comment. We'll have a quick look too at who is available in the chat room. Check this out. Hey Phil, yeah, that's right, Labor Day, of course, which also may mean that some people who might normally attend in person are not here with us either. Do you like the picture I've got there in the background? That's what's my desktop on my computer. It's a place where I like to go running. And I thought it was fitting too that Dan's on his holiday, and we've got an empty space there, but it's a very peaceful space. Thanks for joining me, Phil. So back to our message center. Let's have a look-see at this. There was a few to look at. Some weeks we have a lot, some weeks not so much. This was one of those average weeks. There's a few things to stay informed, and a few things about planning for change. And I do recognise one there just at a glance too, are all around the change in TLS encryption and upgrading, so we'll have a quick look at that too. Firstly, looking at new ways to configure flows in SharePoint Online. Actually, as I glance at this title, it kind of catches me out. I look at that and think, hang on, isn't that supposed to be a capital F for flow? Maybe. Based on feedback we've received from administrators like us, looks like we're still Office 365 administrators, not Microsoft 365 administrators. We're introducing a new option in libraries, document libraries, and I guess lists. Let's just stick with libraries, that's what the note says, to be able to pick up the approval mode desired. So that would be request sign-off or content approval, or to turn off approvals altogether. And we begin rolling this feature out soon. So it was a little while ago that we had this capability to run a flow within a document library, and it had some pre-configured approval capabilities, but it looks like we didn't provide the way to turn it off. And shame on you. Whenever we provide a new feature, we've always got to find a way to turn it off and also talk about how we turn it off. It looks like that's one of the main things about this announcement. How do site owners go about configuring those flows? Of course, those flows that they're talking about are ones at the library level, so you can go into that library and configure that flow in a new panel that's available to you to do that. And it's gradually rolling out early September, so I guess we'll expect it over the next week or so, and definitely completed by mid-September. Let's have a look what's underneath the additional information. Come to think of it, I'm looking at the bottom of the message, and I see like there's this like and dislike. I haven't actually used that before. Have any of you? Yeah, wax on, wax off. Thanks, Phil. Very true. So yes, we're looking at the flow menu, create, see, and configure. So now there's a configure choice, and if we go through and have a look at the sign off, so you can turn on either of those flows that are available to you for approval, request sign off or request content approval. And actually, I'm gonna go and check this in a couple of weeks' time and see that flow. I believe that flow is available when it says libraries. That would also be site page libraries. I think so. I think that was the thing from memory. That you can. I forgot to shove my face over on the other side there. The site page libraries. So when you're trying to do a basic level of publishing, to be able to turn that approval on, so that or request approval on, so that we can get that page approved. Yes, we'll turn off that day there. Right, so that's all good. We'll take a look at the next message. There we go. So TLS. Now this is one that you should have been preparing for change, and we've seen this creep in a number of different places where you might be using TLS encryption. So there is going to be an update to 1.2, TLS 1.2, and that could potentially cause an outage with Skype for Business. So planning ahead, make sure that all your different endpoints are capable of supporting TLS 1.2. Make sure too that if you are in some kind of hybrid mode with Skype for Business Online, that again, those are endpoints, but that they're upgraded to TLS 1.2 as well, so that you can provide a stronger encryption. And so that's what it's all about, making sure that you are meeting those stronger standards. And the time is getting closer. So this one, if we, what do I need to do to prepare for change? That you proactively address those weak points and upgrade to 1.2. If it doesn't support 1.2, then replace it with something else. And do this before October 31st, so that you can maintain the good Skype for Business online services, secure services. Okay. We have mass delete notification in SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. Now, when I read this through at a glance, when I saw the title there, my thought immediately came not to, oops, I made a mistake, I've deleted some stuff and I need some help. More so, I've just been asked to leave my job and someone hasn't locked me out yet, so I'm going to go through and delete libraries and sites and all sorts of, deleting lots of files. And so that's what I thought of with this this new feature. New feature is, so when, let's see, we've got here, it's rolling out shortly, raise awareness of uncommon or accidental file deletions. Very politically correct of you. That is the other scenario, isn't it? Sometimes people have selected a bunch of files in a list and then inadvertently delete them. We will now make the best effort to attempt at notifying your users if a large number of files are deleted, and we'll provide you the option to restore those files. So if I'm reading this through right, it feels like the person who has deleted it will get the warning, rather than, let's say, an admin or a site owner. Let's keep reading on through. So for OneDrive for Business users, a large number of files are deleted from a user's OneDrive. They'll receive an email. and notifying them that the deletion has happened. So that's all good. For SharePoint Online team site users, if a large number of files are deleted, the person that deleted them, there we go, either the site owner, here we go right here, either the site owner or the person deleting them will be sent an email notifying. Now, either the site owner or a member. You know what, I'd prefer the site owner anyway. In fact, I wouldn't like an either or. I think a both scenario was in order, where the site owner and the person who deleted them. Because like I said, there is that other scenario where someone is just going through and deleting a lot of files, a mass of files, just to be destructive on their way out the door. And you don't necessarily need to tell them that they're removing all these files. So it would be good to let the site owner know, or in some cases that ends up being the team or the group owner. Notifications are sent to the users when a high number of files have been deleted per hour. Per hour. Yes, it still kind of leans towards someone who's up to some nefarious kind of activity. Because you don't accidentally delete a whole bunch of files per hour, do you? You don't go, oops, and 16 minutes later, as SpongeBob would say. Oops. Maybe SpongeBob would. We'll leave SpongeBob out of this. Is there anything useful under the additional information? How to restore deleted files. Yep, that's good. Now, remember we were talking a few weeks back about the versioning tool, rather the versioning change that was going to happen. Versioning was going to be turned on by default. It was going to bolster to a certain number of versions that were kept. And this is one of those scenarios, why or what it uses it for. That if a bulk or large number of files are being deleted per hour, that you can go back and use the restore feature, which is powered by the versioning that's turned on in the background by default. So that's something to make use of. And there you go. That's our additional information, is how to restore that. So I guess that is useful. So we've got a couple of good comments there from the chat room. Phil there, site collection admins as well. Okay, so yeah, not just, I think that's what it was referring to with site admins. And yeah, there is Cloud App Security if you are paying for that additional feature. Now there was something that Microsoft relented to the requests recently to make it part of the standard E3. I forget what it was, but it was one of those features where people were saying, yeah, that really should be one that's standard. So good to see that some of these things are changing up. Alright, so keeping on moving. Hello there, Dean. Good to see you too. Let's get on over to... Okay. New group management capabilities in SharePoint Online Admin. Alright, so you've been able to manage groups, Office 365 groups, if you're a global admin for some time. Sometimes you need to give that role to another more specified type of admin, another role. Like if we see here, we've got Exchange admins and global admins, we know, user administration. So these three definitely make sense. Give them the ability to manage Office 365 groups, so that these two don't have to have full admin rights over the whole tenant, but they can manage groups around the membership and collaboration tools and experiences. And we know that Office 365 groups have been born out of Microsoft Exchange, so when we look at that, that makes sense too. But there's another area that this announcement is about, and that's giving the SharePoint Online administrator the ability to manage these groups as well. And this makes sense because one of the default site creation experiences when someone goes to create a site is that it is creating an Office 365 group in the background. So, from when we had that capability to now, if you were just a SharePoint Online administrator, then you didn't have the ability to manage those groups. You could go through and you could even create these site collections on behalf of people, and you could add the members at the time, but there wasn't any way to go back and edit them. Interesting. So if we can have a look at some of that additional information. Okay, how does this affect me, first of all? You'll be able to perform the following tasks in SharePoint Online team sites. You'll be able to create, delete, restore, and change owners of a group. Okay, and that's one of the important things. Is sometimes an owner locks themselves out, or when you are managing ownership of a site because someone's moved on, that you needing to reassign their ownership to someone, or even add a backup admin, a backup owner for that group, then it's good to see that SharePoint Online admins can do that now. And that is at the top of our list in terms of messages. Now, it's not going to be a short group, a short episode. There is a couple of other things that I saw in the Office, the Tech Community blogs. And I just want to ask too, like, how are you guys keeping up to date with those blogs? Let's maybe use this as an example. I know that some of us visit the Tech Community regularly. All right, so as we come into the Microsoft Tech Community, we do have the blogs landing page. And good thing about this is that it does give you a view of any blogs that have come in recently. So at a glance, you can go through and see some of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Looks like about 9 of the most recent blogs that are available to read. And then as you work yourself down, then you can see those blogs or most recent blogs under each of the communities or product groups that are available. So one that I noticed come in and this is one way that I'm keeping up to date with it. I use an app called Feedly, and I'm just subscribing to some of the RSS feeds for each of the blogs that I'm interested in. So that I can just read it all in one place and I can page my way through and see anything that's new. So one that I definitely subscribe to is the SharePoint blog, and I saw this come through in the weekend. Yeah, it would have been the weekend. Let's have a look at this one. Announcing the new. Push my face over that side there. Actually, no, I created another one. Let's try this. There we go. This is a big deal, I think. In fact, it was something that I recently stepped through with one of my team members. We have quite a talented person who makes some really good, well-formatted templates, and we were introducing these templates into a new process at work. And, when you're using a file server, that's quite an easy task. You can just save it as a template file, and every time you double click on it, it will create a new document. And our team's not as clued up with creating things like content types and creating a template the SharePoint way, where you can have that document template. It is underneath the new button, and then you can create a new template based on, or a new document based on that template. Of course, so the SharePoint way has a lot more to it than that. When you're creating a content type, there's lots of different ways to nest in and connect metadata and make sure that all standardizes the way that the document is going to be displayed in a more advanced document library with all these views and potentially to using search to make relevant documents appear as featured content on a page. So lots of good uses for content types. And look, to be honest, if you don't have someone who knows what they're doing on your team, who knows how to create content types, who can maybe design or help you talk through a good taxonomy and a way to create those content types, then you're not going to use that method, are you? And what we were using up until this point was, still, when you synchronize a document library, whether it be OneDrive or a library from your team site, you've got that Files Explorer experience. So down come the files, and if you've uploaded your your template file, then now that it's down on a Windows environment, you can just double click and it creates that that new document. I can see some excitement there in the chat room around that. Yeah, I don't. Let me go over this. So, Joanne, you say there you almost missed this one. Yeah, I almost did too. I saw this blog post, and I want to return back to this soon and show you the date of this, because it appeared during my weekend, kind of an unusual time to let it release, and I'm just wondering too, as I look at the order of some of the posts in Feedly, I think that it might have been released a bit early. I'm not sure. Either it was supposed to go out on Friday and it was late, or it should have gone out sometime this week, because I don't normally see things turn up on my Sunday, which would have been your Saturday in the US. But yeah, definitely a big deal. So, going back to looking at it and talking about it, that use case I was talking about. So those of us who don't know how to create content types, and that's a fair whack of people who are using maybe the, business premium subscription, or even some organizations that use E3 don't necessarily have someone with a SharePoint expertise or even a partnership who's going to show them how to create good content types and get all that together for them. So they might have been using this workaround. Synchronize the document library, document template comes down. To create a new document, just double click on it, just like you do on a file server, and ta-da, there's that document based on that template. Now, the downside to that, for those of us who aren't as familiar with creating these content types and templates, is you go to the document library, you see your template, you open it up, and you actually are working on the template document itself. So there have been some instances, of course, where those who aren't as aware of what they're doing are actually editing the template, dropping in maybe the customer data or filling out that form and leaving that template in a state that can't be reused or zeroed out. So this is why this announcement is a big deal. Definitely a big deal. It is making this process a lot easier for those of us who don't know how to create content types. And at the same time, those who do go to the great effort of trying to create extensive content types and really take advantage of metadata and views and all that sort of goodness, that's still very much supported by this new process. So looking on through, we have a new way of adding templates to a document library, and that's coming. Okay, so I just want to say and call this out. This is coming sometime in September. We'll see that in the additional information a bit later on. And I'd say too that we haven't yet seen the message center message. So sometimes we see this, the blog post comes out before the message center message, and sometimes vice versa. We'll see what comes up later on. Looking under this new button, we have, let's zero in on that a bit. We have a new edit menu. Right, so these are some of our standard things where you would normally see creating regular blank Word documents. And if we're wanting to add our own template, we've got that final option down there too, which is upload your own template. So it's making it possible for some people on, like, say, my team who don't have they don't work their way through those content types. They can take a template that they have designed, that they know how it works, they can upload it, and it's going to become an item in the menu. So let's work in on down here. We'll have a bit of a closer look at managing that menu. You can configure the menu. So here we go into that edit mode, or edit new menu. So edit the new menu, not edit a new menu. It means that they've got all the list there of content types, or rather document templates that they've created. So there's our standard document. Oh no, that's not it. There's our standard ones right just around here. And you're able to turn on and off the ones that are going to be available underneath that new button. So I think that's a good one too. So if you're going ahead and uploading some of these templates, they might be there for a period of time, depending on a cycle of a project or whatever. But you can turn them on and off and change the order, or even just trim out that menu so that only the important ones are there. Maybe you don't need to create a OneNote notebook from the new menu all the time. So yeah, you can do that. Now, if we go down here too, you can see it's still supporting content types. So if you have gone to that extent of creating content types and you want to associate them with these new templates, then you can do so. So that's still getting the power of an end user, or potentially a less skilled SharePoint site owner. They can upload a template, they can change to a defined content type that some other team member has made and said, look, this is related to Ignite documents, and they can associate that, or they can change that as well. So I'll leave you to work your way through the frequently asked questions, but again, I'm seeing a pattern here with SharePoint and modern sites and the modern experience, that it's still about democratizing and making some of the power of SharePoint easier to reach for people that are not as skilled in that area. So see, there's some other good comments there too, still in the chat there. We've got Dean's got an idea. He created a flow to get new blog posts and send to the app-specific channels and teams. All right, so Dean's talking about, I asked much earlier in there, how do people keep up to date with some of these blog posts. So while I'm using an app called Feedly, Dean is going to each of the blog posts streams, or okay, so he creates a flow whenever a new blog post, and I'd say that probably be an RSS connector, and then sends it off to an app-specific channel and teams. So you could potentially have an IT team, and then each channel is covering off a product owner, and then feed those blogs into the right channel. Sounds good. Cool. Now, let's see. There was one other thing that I wanted to look at here in the blogs, and that was a little relevant down here, down under in New Zealand, Australia, and sort of Southeast Asia, that the Microsoft Teams are launching that data residency in our area, and that's sort of starting on August 27th. So that time has elapsed, and now when you do create a Microsoft team for the first time, or if you've signed up for a Microsoft 365 tenant, then the data from a Microsoft team is going to be stored in the same data center where you're signing up for that tenant. So we have had an interesting ride down here in this area of the world, where our tenants at the beginning of Office 365 began, or were being hosted in Singapore and Hong Kong, so the Southeast Asia data centers. A couple of years later, there was a project on to help move some of the data. If you had an existing tenant, it could be moved to some of the new data centers that are in Australia. And that took some time, but that was like a database move apparently, and you could get your SharePoint data shifted over to Australia. Now, when Microsoft Teams came out, it was deployed to the main data centers, of course, and so whenever you created a Microsoft team, there was a portion of that data that was still going to be stored in the Southeast Asian data centers rather than Australia, in my example. Now, this article is really good in that it does break down where does my data sit for Microsoft Teams, because Teams is not just I have Teams data, it's going to sit here. It is broken up into the communications that you engage in. Where are your files, images, etc. Voicemail and contacts. So when you are using that level of telephony in Teams, then where does that all sit? So if we have a slightly closer look at this, your chat and channel messages, that's what they consider Microsoft Teams data. So when you are typing up a chat, where does that live? When you're having a conversation, a team, where does that live? And this is where, up until this point, in my example, that data would live in the Southeast Asia data centers. But going forward, if you are a new organization and you're just, of course, just starting to use Microsoft 365, then your teams will be created in Australia for this data residency, or in other words, alongside the rest of your data. If you have had a tenant for some time, but you have not switched on Teams, so you've avoided, and I don't think there'd be many who have done this. I'm sure at the very least, if you haven't seen it widespread across your organization, maybe the IT department have turned on Teams just to have a quick look. And at that moment, then, because if they've done it before this date, in my example, their data going forward, no matter whether they've come past this date or not, new teams are not going to be created in the Australian data centre. They'll still be created in Southeast Asia. And we'll get to what happens a bit later on. Will there be an option to move that data? So voicemail and contacts, locally based stored and data residency, so in country in Australia. So this really more relates to Skype for Business. So that will be in your country of residency, or rather where your tenant is. Likewise with, so they call out here that if you're using things like Giphy services and third-party services, they're not controlled by Microsoft. They're just attached to the Teams experience. So if you're concerned about where your Giphies come from, then have a look at where those are stored and consider that. But let's think about that. They're just ways of expressing, the next level of emoticon. So there's no need to freak out there. So those changes are happening, and I think later on it talks about, if you have a look at this blog post yourself, I've just seen the time. It is something that you'll be able to eventually move over if you have Teams set up in the existing APAC data center. Good map there, cool. So look out for those options to be able to move the data, but there's no talk about when that would be. Just know that if you're just starting to use Teams, then you are now using that local data center. So in there we've got Australia. Alrighty, so that was the 365 Message Centre show, minus Daniel Glenn, and thanks to those who joined from wherever you are on holiday, or maybe you are in different parts of the world, and like Phil there from Switzerland. We'll see you again shortly. We've got a few things coming up. There's Microsoft Ignite, which a number of our peeps will be at, presenting, talking, and trying to bring that experience to you as well. We still trying to round up a time to share Microsoft Whiteboard with you. Managed to find a time in common with the people from the Microsoft product group, and just trying to get in touch with Louise Fries so that she might still be able to do some of the sketch noting while we talk about whiteboarding. But that was us, and thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.